I'm Larissa Gil-Sanuesa, Young Adult Advocacy Coordinator at FCNL, and I'm here today with José Woss, Legislative Manager for Criminal Justice. Today, we'll be talking about the crises of racism, police brutality, and the militarization of the police. José will talk to us about the role that national legislation can play in addressing these crises and why it is crucial that we lobby our members of Congress for passage of such legislation. On November 14th, there will be over 500 people attending FCNL's annual meeting and lobby day to do just that. I'm particularly excited about this conversation because FCNL's young adult community has been focused on this issue for a long time. They've been lobbying, they've been protesting, and young advocates around the country have helped make police violence the central issue of our time. If you haven't registered for the meeting and our lobby day yet, you can still do that at fcnl.org/annual meeting. So let's get started. José, thank you again for being here to talk to us about this. How is national legislation going to help the country address the epidemic of police violence, police brutality, and the militarization of police in Black communities in our country?
Thanks, Larissa. Just days after the most consequential election of our lifetimes, we will gather virtually to lobby Congress for strong action to address police brutality, the militarization of the police, and legislation that could begin to transform the practice of policing in this country. The first thing I would say, which you already know, is Congress won't act unless they hear our voices. And to your question, why does national legislation matter? There are 18,000 police jurisdictions in the United States. There's really important work, really important progress already being made in local cities, counties, and states across the country. But we need national legislation to insist that there be consistent national standards in all of these jurisdictions. This is why we need national legislation to make sure every jurisdiction bans chokeholds and so much more. In November, we will be lobbying Congress to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, or legislation with the same essential points. While this legislation does not do everything that is needed, it takes an important step forward. We supported passage of the Justice and Policing Act, H.R. 7120, in the House. Now we are urging the Senate to pass a companion bill in the Senate, S. 3912, or legislation with the same provisions.
Thanks, José. Now, can I ask who supports this legislation?
FCNL was proud to stand with the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights as they put forth a strong set of policy changes needed to begin to address the problems. Many of those recommendations were incorporated into H.R. 7120, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, that was originally developed by the Congressional Black Caucus.
Now, how does this work in Washington fit into the broader movement to defund the police, confront police brutality, and structural racism?
The municipal and state movement to take funding away from the police and put it into community services, social work, etc., is some of the most effective work going on right now in communities. These demands come from places where police perpetrate violence on a regular basis, and it's understandable that communities want a smaller footprint in their communities. Real change is happening at the local level. Most of the funding for local police work comes from local jurisdictions. And frankly, those local governments is where the change in allocation of resources needs to happen. And we are inspired by what local governments are doing. But that is hard work as well. And it will take consistent community action to make that change. At the federal level, we believe passage of federal legislation that will take the following steps would be a vital complement to the essential work going on at the local level. Prohibit federal, state, and local law enforcement from racial, religious, and discriminatory policing. We need to mandate training and require data collection to that respect. We need to raise the use of force standard to prevent police officers from using lethal force unless all non-lethal methods have been exhausted. This requires the use of de-escalation techniques. We need to ban chokeholds and no-knock warrants. And we need to limit the transfer of military-grade equipment, the 1033 program, to state and local law enforcement. Congress needs to act to insist that every jurisdiction in the country follow these standards at a minimum. We have much work to do, and this legislation is only a first step in addressing fatal racist police killings in this country.
All right, now I think this is the million-dollar question. Will this legislation pass in 2020?
We don't know. The House has passed the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. The Senate has attempted to pass a much weaker bill known as the Justice Act, which does not meet the needs of the moment, contains weak provisions and commissions. We do not believe this legislation is sufficient, and furthermore, fear that passage of this bill would derail efforts to get effective legislation passed. Without public pressure, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act will have no chance of passage in 2020. And without public pressure in 2020, the bill will also not win passage in 2021. Please attend FCNL's virtual annual meeting and lobby day to press Congress right after the elections to take action to address racist police brutality.
Thank you, Jose, and thanks to all of you for the amazing work you're doing. I'm so excited to see you in November and to advocate with you on this really important issue.